He had a report last week. Texas Governor Perry Bilderberg, ace in the hole. Is Texas Governor Rick Perry the Bilderberg group's Republican candidate in waiting in 2012? Well, we know that Mitt Romney's also one of the horses they've got in their stable. And he's getting ready tomorrow to jump on a big jet airplane and fly to Switzerland, where they're going to be meeting in the high mountain resort of St. Moritz, where they filmed at least 4 James Bond films. One of the most beautiful places in the world, it's described, pretty close to the Matterhorn. The globalists love to meet in those high and mighty type places, like they did at the North American Union meeting in 2006. WikiLeaks has now released that, confirming the documents we got through Judicial Watch that they planned the secret merger of the North American Union already in place with the EU. And Jim is just an amazing individual. He was a news and sports writer back in the 50s and 60s. By the 70s, he began to investigate Bilderberg Group. And for decades, he was called a lunatic by the media. They said it didn't exist, that he was delusional. Just 3 years ago, New York Times said that. They said Jones was at the Marriott in Virginia, believing that there were elites there when there weren't. So they still try that some as well, thinking their readers are abject morons. Now, the reason this is so important is Jim Tucker has gotten scores, more than 20 that I can list, pieces of intel years before it becomes mainstream news of exactly what the globalists are going to do. The fall of the Berlin Wall, the ouster of Margaret Thatcher, Bush to endorse carbon taxes, and then he did it and people were shocked. On and on and on and on. And he has intel, the only person who actually has intel directly in Bilderberg. AmericanFreePress.net is where you can read his reportage, and you can also subscribe there. Jim, thank you so much for joining us. What new intel do you have? Because I know you usually get a lot about their agenda before you go. What is the latest intel, Jim Tucker?
Well, it's still pretty much unchanged from our last conversation. They are, of course, determined to keep the recession going through the year 2012, or whatever reasons that serves their purposes. And in spite of the fact the oil price is going down, they're trying hard to force them back up. They want Americans to pay $7 a gallon for gasoline. They've never quite gotten that far, but they're working at it. And more good news from patriots. I've been told since our last conversation, Bilderberg Insider, who's been very reliable for more than 20 years, that they're grousing and complaining about these dirty dirties. You, me, and all the patriots around the country who object to the Bilderberg playing God. They're simply outraged. So, and they're telling us too that Obama is their good friend, and he had to disregard the War Powers Act so we could keep the war going in Libya, which they want to, as you know, want to use a spark plug to light up the entire Middle East. So they've forgiven him for that, understanding why he has to do it.
Now, specifically, Jim, let's go back to 2007, and I went and looked it up. It wasn't just Lindsey Williams that said he had sources, and now we know Ken Fromm is one of them since he deceased, the former head of Atlantic Richfield, that they wanted to break our back financially by raising oil to 150. You got that out of Bilderberg. A year later, it happened. Then in 2008, you said folks aren't consuming like they thought they would. They're going to lower it again, and that indeed happened. What are you getting on the energy front about what they're planning to do with the devaluation of the dollar?
Oh, they've been cheerleaders for nuclear power plants since the late 1990s. They discovered that's a great source of wealth for them. When you build nuclear plants, you're giving contracts to big companies throughout the world, of which they own a great portion, and they make great profits. So they're very discouraged that their host state of Switzerland has decided it's going to get out of the nuclear power business. I think Finland said it would too. And also they're very concerned about the euro going down, and maybe they're even afraid the euro will simply disappear, because when you get countries like Switzerland, a peaceful country where you're required to own a gun, saying they're getting out of the nuclear power business, along with 2 or 3 other countries. It's very unpopular in Germany, and in fact, Prime Minister Merkel, I think, is going wobbly on nuclear power, which she so strongly advocated, and that's very distressful to them. But the more they grieve, the more we enjoy it.
Jim, going back to your source, you have multiple, of course, but one inside Bilderberg, particularly high up. More detail, because from what I'm getting, but I want to put words in your mouth, are they panicked? Are they routed? Are they in trouble? You say they're upset about the anti-globalist movement, yourself, myself. Did they say that specifically? Flesh out as much as you can for us the state of their new world order, because from what you've just said, it sounds like things aren't going too well for them.
That's true. Things have been going badly for the last several years, and for the last several years we've been quoting them as saying that those dirty gerties on the sidewalks, those primitives, well, they use a lot of expletives that you could not use in polite society, but they're simply outraged to find that they have protesters outside. They've always wanted their meetings to be secret, with no knowledge of them whatsoever. Now, all these years, they've had to see people outside screaming at them and protesting their meeting. So that's got them very outraged. In fact, they're reading about it in the European press even now. Americans are reading about it in the American Free Press and hearing about it from you. In Europe, a lot of major newspapers, The Guardian of London and others, have jumped into the ballpark and are telling their readers what and where on Bilderberg, and raising the same kind of questions we do.
So their hoax of saying it didn't exist in your 35 years of coverage, what was it, 6-7 years ago that the dam started to break and we started to see big mainline press coverage like we're seeing now in The Guardian and other big papers of what they're doing in secret? When did the dam really start to break on their cover-up?
Let me stretch down here and pull out a note or two. It goes back, I'm sure, to the 90s. First time we saw protesters outside the gates. Hold on just a second.
He is getting his notes. Again, Jim is a battle-hardened, true journalist with the straw hat. Go ahead, Jim.
I'm backing up on it. It goes back to, actually to
Portugal, doesn't it?
1988 in Austria, where a few of the newspapermen came out. And that was the 1988 in Austria. And that was when the readers did something I should have thought about long ago. That year we had the story of where and when so early, as in something like November, that our readers across the sea in Europe, they have to pay a tremendous price because of the postage costs, all that stuff. But they had, they do put it on Bilderberg, so readers within a 200-mile circumference called and said, should we alert the local press? Should we tell our newspapers and broadcasters? I said, yes, yes, yes. Now we send out a letter, as you know, every year, urging readers within the area to do exactly that. I should have thought about it much earlier than that, but...
well, Jim, I understand the dam broke in the late 80s because of your decades of work in Europe, but even 7-8 years ago, our media here in the U.S. was still saying it didn't exist. Isn't that why one of the reasons the mainstream media is so discredited now?
Well, yes, you start off with the control of so much of it. For instance, the Washington Post, as you and I'm sure most of your listeners are aware, controlled by Bilderberg. The publishers attended every meeting since they first met under the name Bilderberg in 1954. I mean, they died, the successors of the Graham family have always attended Bilderberg meetings, along with publishers New York Times and Los Angeles Times. Now, the Washington Post owns 170 newspapers, Washington Post Company, big and small. Now, they can directly order all of their 170 newspapers throughout the country to never use the word Bilderberg, no coverage whatsoever. And they better follow orders. They don't get fired.
Well, Jim, here's an example. In 2008, you and I were there. We knew Obama and Hillary were inside. The media, the number one story in the country is, where is Hillary and Obama hiding? We called ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox, local papers. None of them would come, not even the local Virginia paper, but the Epoch Times came and covered it. So that shows the control that they're claiming. They don't know where Obama and Hillary are. The mystery meeting, we're there. We know they're there. The Secret Service goes in, the motorcades. We're telling them, and the media had such control. That's how controlled U.S. media is. European is not that controlled. Now, Jim, in our precious time with you, other intel, if they're upset about the alternative media, you've talked about their moves to try to censor the press earlier. We've seen the UN a month ago, 2 weeks ago, our own media calling to start censoring the Internet, to start Internet taxes regulation. Do you have any intel on how they're planning to counter the Internet and alternative press that's kicking their hind end?
Well, there has been some conversation about how to call up some of the newspapers that they don't control, and what's his name? That guy who bought up all those newspapers, got in trouble, owns most of the newspapers in the world. They said he's still our good friend. He's not allowed at Bilderberg meeting anymore. Soros, among them. He's still our good friend, though, although for political reasons, being a convicted felon, he cannot attend anymore.
So Soros isn't allowed to attend?
No. They're very prissy. One of their founders, Lockheed guy, was one of the founders of Bilderberg's not being able to attend, but he's still their good friend because of the Lockheed scandal of back in the 1950s.
That was with Prince Bernhard.
Yeah, Prince Bernhard, right. I was trying to remember.
Okay, now let's shift gears again in the time we've got, and we appreciate you, Jim, joining us from margaret-thatcher.net. We're going to have links to your reportage throughout the week at Infowars.com and PrisonPlanet.com.